Lord of the Mysteries. Chapter 11:14. The Remnant Will. The forest that should have been engulfed in darkness and in decline was filled with the orange-red light of dusk. The light was intense and burned like fire, but it couldn't help but carry a sense of brilliance with it that couldn't be ignored. With the unshadowed crucifix that seemed like pure light condensating in his hand, Derek Berg slowly walked ahead. The grizzled demon hunter Colin, who was walking behind him to the left, held two straight swords in his hand. Hyam, who was walking behind him to the right, held the Thunder God's roar hammer. This 2-meter-tall half-giant was prepared to switch the hammer for the sealed artifact with Derek at any time. The radiance emitted by the unshadowed crucifix became increasingly dim, as though the sun had already set in the horizon, leaving only a sliver of golden light. Of course, no one from the City of Silver had ever seen such a scene before. They could only use the descriptions from ancient literature to imagine it. Similarly, this was the first time they understood what a sunset meant. Whoosh! As the exploration team ventured deeper, a wind began to blow in the nearly frozen waning forest. It was as if countless living beings were weeping deep within the forest. However, Derek and company didn't feel any effects of the wind. Whoosh! The sound of the wind intensified, making his heart tremble. Derek suddenly felt a chill run down his neck, causing his hair to stand on end. His body and mind turned cold. Generally speaking, it was human instinct to shrink their necks, raise their arms, and defend their backs at such moments in time. They would then half turn their bodies, observe the situation, and be ready to attack. However, Derek didn't do so, because in a dangerous environment, rashness would often result in terrible situations. Furthermore, he had the chief and his teammate behind him. He had full faith in them that they would react in time, thus, he had handed his life to them. With a swoosh, a silvery white blade wrapped by a small snake-like electric bolt flew across the side of Derek's neck, vaporizing a blurry and twisted figure into the light of dusk. At the same time, the unshadowed crucifix was triggered by something. It suddenly broke out of its gloomy and dim state, making the light it emitted to once again become bright and pure. Dawn seemed to come to the surrounding area immediately as indescribable black shadows began to show themselves in the light of dawn before quickly melting away. After everything calmed down, Derek looked ahead and asked curiously, "What are these? They don't look like wraiths, shadows, or evil spirits." Demon Hunter Colin surveyed the area and slowly said, "A remnant aura of some sort. They seem to have combined with the power of dusk, causing a certain anomaly. I've never seen such monsters." Derek tightened his grip on the unshadowed crucifix and moved his other finger, which hadn't been stabbed, onto the thorns. Relying on the unshadowed crucifix, which was the nemesis of the evil around them, the expedition team proceeded rather smoothly. Before long, they arrived deep in the waning forest. Through the trees, they could vaguely see a cliff and orange-red clouds in the distance. The damage here wasn't too serious. The branches and leaves remained suspended in midair, blocking the frozen dusk, making the environment darken. After carefully circling around the place, the area before Derek's eyes suddenly lit up. He saw 2 grayish-white, mottled tombstones. Before he could carefully observe them, the rays of dust that shone through the gaps of the leaves had produced a strange refraction effect at the same time, interweaving themselves into a gigantic figure that was nearly 10 meters tall. This figure was very blurry and contained an everlasting and imperturbable air to it. It was like a reflection from a mythical era. Its skin was grayish-blue, and it wore silver-gray armor that seemed to be stained with blood. Its face was glowing like the setting sun, as though it was a manifestation of its eyes. Just its existence alone had caused the surrounding trees and the void to bend, making everything around it to begin waning uncontrollably. Upon witnessing this scene, a thought surfaced in everyone's mind without any explanation: Giant King, Ancient God Ormer. Goosebumps appeared on the skins of the members of the expedition team, Joshua, Hyam, and Aunt Iona. Bit by bit, the goosebumps emitted grayish-blue colors. At the center of their eyebrows, flesh and blood were squirming, as if a monster was about to bore out. They had collectively been put into the state of being on the verge of losing control. They didn't even see the mythical creature form. Merely approaching the figure had led to signs of losing control as the severity of it increased. Derek Berg was relatively alright because the pure light of the unshadowed crucifix had enveloped him, giving him a warm feeling, allowing him to temporarily withstand the waning effect. At this moment, Colin Iliad had already bent down. He held two swords that were smeared with ointment, and he ran towards that terrifying figure like a hurricane at high speeds. However, this demon hunter didn't charge in a straight line. His footwork was ingenious as he moved left and right, approaching his enemy in a zigzag-like manner. The gigantic figure that stood in the twilight looked at everything with its sunset-like eyes. It seemed emotionless, like a statue carved out of stone. Suddenly, the glow on its face flashed. It then bent down and heavily pounded its fists on the ground. Boom! The ground shook violently as a fissure opened up. It made Derek and the others lose their balance as they staggered and almost fell. As for Demon Hunter Colin, he had leaped up ahead of time to a height of more than 10 meters, and he cleaved downward with his two swords in a domineering manner. At that moment, the figure that seemed to come from a mythical legend pulled out an illusory sword from the fissure in the ground. The giant sword that seemed like a manifestation of dusk itself was suddenly swung forward. The orange-red storm of light suddenly took form and swept towards Demon Hunter Colin, as well as Derek and company who were right behind him. Wherever the light passed, the trees would wither and the soil would turn to sand. Everything began waning in an irreversible manner as a path was drawn out. Boom! The twilight storm was blocked by invisible walls, causing the forest to shake. At some point in time, Shepherd Elder Lovia had appeared beside Derek. In front of him was a tall and illusory figure covered in silver armor. The figure with a dark red glow near its eyes genuflected and stabbed an illusory great sword into the ground, creating an unusually strong and invisible wall. Bam! At this moment, Demon Hunter Colin's two swords slashed at the nearly 10-meter tall figure that possessed the aura of an ancient god, sending off countless sparks. The silver-white figure didn't suffer any damage. The silver-gray armor that was covered in blood spots only dimmed a little. With the force of the rebound, Colin once again soared up. He flipped in midair and launched his attack again. In the waning domain, he didn't dare release his mythical creature form, because it was very likely that there was no way of reversing it. Seeing that the phantom that stemmed from a mythical legend had been blocked, Derek hurriedly followed the sudden tremor and heat from the unshadowed crucifix in his palm, and he pressed his finger against a spike. His blood surged into the cross along with the pain. A vigorous and bright light churned out, flying into the air and turning downwards, instantly enveloping the figure in silver-gray armor. His eyes were like a miniature setting sun. In the holy, solemn, and pure light, the gigantic and illusory figure stopped moving, as if it had encountered its natural enemy, and the silver-gray armor that was tainted with the light of dusk began to melt. Seizing this opportunity, the evil spirit knight in front of Shepherd Elder Lovia pulled out the illusory great sword from the ground. With several silver rifts that oscillated between disappearing and reappearing, they instantly struck the enemy. Demon Hunter Colin's two swords cleaved downward, as though they were emitting rays of the light of dawn that enveloped the head of the ancient figure. Joshua, Hyam, and the others didn't hesitate to unleash their strongest attacks. After 3 rounds, the illusory figure that seemed to have transmigrated from time had finally begun to crumble, being reduced to burning orange dots of light. When Demon Hunter Colin landed on the ground, he deliberated and said, "That should have been the remnants of the Giant King's will to protect this area. After many years of melding with the environment, it has a certain degree of strength and a form. It's a type of evil spirit. What secrets are hidden here?" Upon hearing the chief's words, everyone cast their gazes forward, towards the place where the terrifying phantom had barred their way. The atmosphere was rather heavy. Fortunately, it was only an evil spirit that was restrained by the unshadowed crucifix. It was just a tiny portion of its remnant will and had almost no strength left. After thousands of years, it's still as terrifying as ever. What would a real ancient god be like? Why would he have such a strong will to protect this? Is it because it's where his parents are buried? As Derek heaved a sigh of relief, he followed the chief and company towards the tomb while being plagued with puzzlement and curiosity. Phew! There's no need for me to do anything. I have to say, this unshadowed crucifix really is very useful in the giant king's court. It's so good that I'm wondering if it's Adam's goal. Above the gray fog, Klein heaved a sigh of relief and lowered the sea god's scepter that had been raised higher. He then cast his gaze at the place where the giant king's remnant will had continued protecting for over thousands of years. The first thing he saw was two ancient model tombstones. On them were the words Father and Mother in Jotun. They contained a mysteriousness that could stir the powers of nature. It allowed one to directly feel the mixed emotions of nostalgia, sadness, pain, and guilt without realizing that they were infected and making them feel depressed. Behind the stone pillar was a grave, but it had already been destroyed, revealing two black coffins underneath. It was unknown who had opened the lids of the coffins, as though a confirmation had been made. This made the two grayish-white skeletons lying inside become bathed in the light that penetrated through the leaves, dyeing them with an orange-red color that resembled blood. These two skeletons had the shape of humans. One was less than 1.9 meters tall, while the other was less than 1.8 meters tall.